When people can't read you, they start writing their own stories about you. And that's exactly how the chosen one ends up fooling an entire crowd without even trying. Before they knew it, you became the unexpected force moving through their assumptions like a ghost with a mission, the spiritual assassin they never saw coming, not because you hid, but because they weren't paying attention. Here's a fact that sets the tone. Psychologists say humans fill in missing information with whatever makes them feel comfortable. And trust me, they filled in your blanks with the wrong crayons. They painted you as the soft one, the clueless one, the don't worry about them one, all while you were quietly evolving into someone who could dismantle their illusions with the precision of a surgeon and the patience of a monk who's had just enough nonsense for one lifetime. Your journey wasn't loud, it was strategic. You learned early that visibility is overrated, especially when the people watching you can't see past their own insecurities. So you moved like a plot twist, slowly, silently, and then suddenly. One minute they thought they had you figured out, the next minute they were wondering if they accidentally stepped into the wrong storyline. And yes, you left them confused, beautifully confused. The kind of confusion that makes people check the spiritual GPS to see how they got overtaken by the person they counted out. You showed them that being underestimated isn't an insult, it's free cover. And you used that cover like someone who didn't just read the assignment, you rewrote it in invisible ink. This is the story of how you fooled them without tricks, without masks, and without pretending. You fooled them by being exactly who you are, someone whose silence isn't empty, whose presence isn't predictable, and whose energy carries more accuracy than their assumptions ever will. Welcome to the breakdown of how the chosen one became the surprise they never prepared for, and the lesson they'll never forget. Number 1, they mistook your quiet rebuilding for disappearance, not knowing you were sharpening the part of you that destroys illusions. People are quick to judge absence as weakness, to label silence as surrender, and to assume that when someone steps back, they've given up. But you didn't disappear. You simply retreated to the place where real transformation happens. While everyone else was busy showing off, fighting for attention, or trying to control narratives, you were quietly rebuilding yourself, layer by layer, skill by skill, vision by vision. What they saw as emptiness or withdrawal was actually the furnace where your mind, your intuition, and your inner power were being forged. This is the brilliance of your strategy. People don't fear what they can't see, and they never suspect the calmest ones because calmness is mistaken for harmlessness. But in that quiet, you were identifying patterns, studying weaknesses, and learning exactly what makes people tick. You weren't passive. You were sharpening the part of yourself that recognizes illusions, tears them apart, and exposes the truth without a single word. You were becoming the version of yourself that doesn't react to nonsense, but removes nonsense from the equation entirely. And when you reappeared, it wasn't with fanfare or exaggerated proof of change. It was subtle, undeniable, and devastatingly precise. The very same people who had written you off were blindsided because they never imagined someone could evolve that completely under the radar. They mistook absence for fragility, when in reality it was the exact opposite, a calculated rebuilding of a power they could never predict. Your silence wasn't emptiness, your retreat wasn't fear, and your invisibility wasn't weakness. It was strategy, it was preparation, it was the slow, deliberate sharpening of a mind and spirit capable of dismantling illusions and expectations alike. While they were busy projecting their assumptions onto you, you were quietly constructing a force they didn't even know existed. And that is why the quiet ones always come back stronger, sharper, and impossible to ignore. Number 2, you fooled them because you never played the role they cast you in. You wrote a whole new script they weren't smart enough to read. People love to put others into boxes. They assign labels, decide what someone is capable of, and then spend their energy trying to fit that person into a story they already believe. That was their mistake with you. They assumed they understood your limits, your motives, and your patterns, but what they didn't know was that you were never interested in following their script. While they were busy watching for predictable behavior, you were quietly writing an entirely new story, one they didn't even know existed. This isn't about deception in a shallow sense. It's about mastering yourself so thoroughly that your actions can't be predicted based on old assumptions. You weren't acting, you were evolving. You were creating a version of yourself that moved beyond the expectations imposed on you, beyond the judgments that tried to define you. Every word, every gesture, and every choice was guided by your own logic, not the one they had written for you. That is the real brilliance of fooling them, not by hiding, but by being so authentically unexpected that their entire understanding of you collapses. The people around you never suspected because they were blinded by their own certainty. They were convinced that someone like you couldn't grow that far or act that differently. They weren't ready to see what you were capable of because they had already decided who you were, and human brains rarely update their scripts once a narrative is set. By the time they realized their assumptions were wrong, the new version of you was fully in place, operating at a level they had no reference for. Fooling them wasn't an accident, it was a byproduct of self-mastery. You understood that to be underestimated is a privilege, a hidden advantage that lets you move with freedom and precision. While they were trapped in their own expectations, you were free to create, execute, and elevate yourself in ways that left them stunned. And that is why the ones who never played by the rules end up rewriting the rules entirely, leaving everyone else scrambling to understand a story they can't read. Number 3. Your real power was never your strength, but your ability to study people while they believed you were harmless. Most people show their power through force, noise, or visible action. They make a point of proving themselves, thinking that presence equals dominance. You never needed that. Your power wasn't in how much you could push or how loud you could be. It was in how quietly and precisely you observed. While everyone else was busy showcasing themselves, you were noticing patterns, understanding motives, and seeing the truth behind every word and gesture. People thought you were harmless, underestimated you, and dismissed your presence, and that's exactly what gave you the edge. What makes this exceptional is the level of patience and awareness it requires. You weren't reacting impulsively to what people did. You were calculating, learning, and building a map of their intentions. Every boast, every lie, every hidden agenda was being recorded in your mind, and the more they believed you were naive, the more freely they revealed themselves. They were handing you their secrets, weaknesses, and insecurities without realizing it. That is the core of real power, not the ability to dominate, but the ability to see clearly while others blind themselves with their assumptions. By the time they realized what was happening, you were already ahead. Their harmless assessment of you became their blind spot, the very space where you positioned yourself to move undetected. You didn't need confrontation to prove superiority. The quiet collection of truth was more potent than any display of strength could ever be. This is why underestimated people are often the most dangerous in the subtle sense. You weren't loud and you weren't visible, but your understanding of human behavior allowed you to act with precision when the moment demanded it. People around you didn't see the strategy forming beneath the surface, and that's what made your influence inevitable. Your real power isn't measured in muscle or noise. It's measured in the clarity with which you understand people and the patience with which you wait for the perfect moment to reveal that understanding. Number 4. You moved like someone who had nothing to prove, which made them believe you had nothing to offer. The moment people sense desperation in someone, they start taking them seriously. They notice ambition that is loud, confidence that is flashy, or strength that demands attention. You didn't give them that. You moved through life with the kind of calm that suggested you had already won, even if the world didn't know it yet. That absence of effort to impress wasn't weakness. It was a shield, a mask, and a strategy all at once. While they were busy measuring you against their standards, you were quietly building a version of yourself that existed far beyond their capacity to understand. This is the genius of having nothing to prove. People assumed you were ordinary, limited, or irrelevant, and in doing so, they revealed themselves. Their arrogance blinded them. They underestimated your capacity because they couldn't see your quiet commitment, your discipline, or the way you studied the world in a way that prepared you for exactly the right moments. While they were distracted by appearances, you were stacking advantages, strengthening your mind, and sharpening your perception. You were present, but invisible in the ways that mattered. By the time they realized your true capabilities, it was too late for them to catch up. The very same lack of effort to impress became your greatest advantage. They were still trying to fit you into their outdated assumptions, while you had already rewritten the rules of engagement. Moving like you had nothing to prove doesn't make you weak. It makes you untouchable because people only strike at what they can measure, and you became immeasurable. Your power was in restraint, your influence in subtlety, and your strategy in patience. They believed they saw everything about you, but what they missed was the quiet preparation, the invisible evolution, and the unseen depth that gave you an edge no one could anticipate. They thought your calmness was nothing. They thought your silence was emptiness. They were wrong. It was everything. Number 5. They never suspected you because you were the only one in the room not fighting to be seen. Most people believe that visibility equals power. The louder you are, the more attention you grab, the more people think you matter. You understood something they never did. True influence doesn't demand an audience. While everyone else was scrambling for recognition, validation, and status, you stayed rooted, observing, learning and moving without the need for applause. That stillness, that refusal to compete for attention, made you invisible in the ways that mattered. People around you assumed you were powerless, harmless, or even insignificant, and that assumption became your secret weapon. Being unnoticed isn't passive, it's intentional. You weren't hiding because you lacked strength. You weren't performing because you had already built it internally. Every word they spoke, every action they took, every slip they made, you saw it all while remaining a calm presence in the background. People let their guards down around you because they thought you were just another observer, someone who wasn't a threat. They never suspected that their own overconfidence, their need to be seen, and their projection of control were playing directly into your hands. That freedom to watch without participating allowed you to understand dynamics, predict moves, and position yourself with precision. You were the one quietly setting the stage, moving pieces, and accumulating insight while everyone else was busy performing their roles poorly. Your power wasn't flashy, but it was devastatingly effective. When the time came, your presence was no longer unnoticed. It was undeniable. They underestimated you because you didn't need to prove yourself, and that misunderstanding gave you an advantage they could never anticipate. You became the person who quietly shapes outcomes, while the rest of the room is busy shaping appearances. That is the rare kind of mastery that confuses, overwhelms, and leaves people scrambling to understand how someone who seemed invisible became unstoppable. You never fought to be seen, and that is exactly why, when it mattered, you couldn't be ignored. Number 6. Your growth wasn't loud because it wasn't meant to impress. It was meant to prepare. Most people grow for attention. They chase validation, measure their worth by likes, applause, or acknowledgement, and broadcast every step as proof of progress. You didn't operate that way. Your growth was quiet, deliberate, and internal. It wasn't about showing the world what you were becoming. It was about becoming someone the world wasn't ready for. While they were busy seeking approval, you were busy sharpening skills, strengthening your mind, and evolving in ways that couldn't be captured by recognition or applause. Preparation is invisible, and that's exactly what made it so powerful. You weren't performing for an audience. You were building a version of yourself capable of handling challenges they couldn't even foresee. You understood that real change happens when no one is watching. It's in the unseen hours, the unacknowledged struggles, and the silent decisions that shape the foundation of someone unstoppable. Your quiet growth became armor, strategy, and advantage all at once. People assumed that if you weren't talking about your progress, it didn't exist. They mistook silence for stagnation, simplicity for weakness, and invisibility for irrelevance. That misjudgment gave you space to evolve beyond their expectations. Every lesson you learned, every strength you cultivated, and every insight you gained added to a version of you that would shock them when fully revealed. They never suspected that the person they thought was small, ordinary, or soft had been quietly assembling the tools, knowledge, and perspective to outpace them entirely. By the time your growth became visible, it was undeniable and inescapable. It wasn't flashy, because it didn't need to be. It didn't need approval, because it didn't depend on it. The quietness of your evolution was your advantage, a subtle power that left others scrambling to catch up. Your growth was never about impressing anyone. It was about preparing yourself to move through life with precision, strength, and clarity that no one could anticipate or challenge. And that is the kind of evolution that changes everything without ever needing to announce itself. Number 7. They laughed at your softness, not knowing you had mastered the art of letting people reveal their true nature first. People often mistake kindness, patience, or calmness for weakness. They laugh at it, dismiss it, or try to take advantage of it. They don't realize that what they see as softness is actually discipline, strategy, and intelligence at work. You understood that rushing to prove strength, to dominate, or to force respect only feeds their ego and confirms their assumptions. Instead, you let them speak, act, and show who they really are while you remain steady, observing, and untouchable. This approach turns their arrogance into your advantage. By appearing non-threatening, you create an environment where people expose their motives, biases, and insecurities without even realizing it. They drop their guard because they believe you won't fight back. And in that moment, you gather the insight that others spend years trying to extract through conflict. Your softness isn't emptiness. It's a tool that allows you to see clearly while others blind themselves with their assumptions. It takes patience and restraint to pull this off. Most people react, argue, or try to prove themselves at every turn, giving away pieces of their strategy, their fear, and their ego. You, however, let the world reveal itself on its own, calmly taking note of every slip, every exaggeration, every hidden agenda. And when the time comes, your response is no longer reactive. It's precise, informed, and unavoidable. By mastering the art of observing while appearing harmless, you transform laughter into underestimation, and underestimation into power. The people who mocked you never realized they were showing you everything you needed to know about them. They were revealing their own weaknesses while thinking they were seeing yours. Your softness was never about you. It was about understanding them, positioning yourself strategically, and moving in ways they could never anticipate. And that is the quiet brilliance of someone who has learned that strength isn't always loud, visible, or aggressive. Sometimes it's in the patience to let others reveal themselves first. Number 8. You became dangerous the moment you stopped reacting and started calculating. Most people measure strength by how quickly they respond, how loudly they defend themselves, or how aggressively they confront challenges. You understood something far deeper. Power isn't in reaction, it's in calculation. The moment you stopped reacting to every slight, insult or assumption, and instead started observing, analyzing and predicting, you became untouchable. While others exhausted themselves proving a point, you were quietly mastering the game they didn't even know they were playing. This is where your real danger comes from. People underestimate the calm, the measured, and the silent, because they equate action with visibility. They believe the loudest response indicates the strongest person, and in doing so, they blind themselves to someone who moves with precision. You were dangerous not because you acted, but because you understood the rules, the players, and the timing better than anyone else in the room. Every move you made was deliberate, every choice intentional, and every silence a tool to uncover what others would never willingly reveal. When you start calculating instead of reacting, you gain clarity. You see patterns, predict behavior, and position yourself to act in a way that leaves people stunned. Their impulsive actions, their rash words, and their unchecked emotions become raw data, feeding your understanding while they continue to think they're in control. By the time they realize they misjudged you, it's too late. The moment for reaction has passed, and your calculated action has already changed everything. This shift from reaction to calculation doesn't just protect you, it elevates you. It turns underestimation into opportunity, mistakes into insight, and assumptions into blind spots for others. They may have thought they knew you, that they could push, provoke, or manipulate you, but once you stopped reacting, you moved beyond their influence. That is why calculated calm is more dangerous than uncontrolled force, and why someone who has mastered it becomes a quiet, unstoppable force no one saw coming. You didn't become dangerous overnight. You became inevitable. Number 9. They underestimated the scars you turned into strategy. Scars tell a story, but most people treat them like weaknesses. They see pain, mistakes, or betrayals as damage, as something that makes a person fragile or flawed. You saw it differently. Every cut, every wound, every betrayal became material for your evolution. What others thought would break you only made you sharper, wiser, and more precise. Those scars weren't reminders of suffering. They were blueprints for strategy. You didn't carry them as burdens, you carried them as weapons of insight, a map of exactly what to avoid, anticipate, and overcome. People misread scars because they can't imagine turning pain into power. They assumed your experiences would make you cautious, timid, or reactive. In reality, you transformed them into understanding. Each scar taught you how people operate under pressure, where weakness hides, and what motivations drive deceit, envy, or betrayal. You studied the patterns hidden in pain while the world assumed you were recovering. The deeper the wound, the sharper your perception became. They never realized that what they thought was your vulnerability was actually the foundation of your advantage. Your strategy born from scars isn't visible on the surface. It doesn't announce itself. It manifests in the way you read intentions, anticipate moves, and make decisions that seem effortless to outsiders. People think you're lucky, intuitive, or untouchable, but what they don't see is that you've trained your mind through fire, honing patience, discernment, and precision. Pain became your tutor, and every lesson was internalized with clarity they could never achieve. This is why underestimating someone with scars is the gravest mistake anyone can make. You didn't just survive, you evolved. You didn't just endure, you adapted, and the very people who assumed your past made you weak ended up facing a person who was stronger, more aware, and far more capable than they could imagine. Every scar became part of your strategy, and every strategy made you unstoppable in ways no one anticipated. Number 10. You read energies long before you understood words. That's why you navigate people like a battlefield. People rely on what they hear, what they're told, and what they see on the surface. You learned early that those things are often misleading. Words can be polished, smiles can be fake, and appearances can be staged. What you mastered was reading the energy beneath it all, the unspoken signals, the subtle shifts, the intentions hiding behind confident fronts. That ability allowed you to navigate situations, relationships, and conflicts like someone moving through a battlefield, spotting traps before they were laid, and understanding motivations before they were voiced. Reading energy isn't about intuition alone, it's about observation, pattern recognition, and patience. You notice the micro-expressions, the tone changes, the hesitations, and the overcompensations that reveal who people really are. While others are distracted by the stories they're told, you're deciphering the truth of behavior. That skill makes you untouchable, because you can anticipate reactions, manipulate dynamics subtly, and position yourself in ways no one else sees coming. People around you assume they are leading, controlling, or hiding things, but you've already mapped it all in your mind. This skill turns ordinary interactions into strategic opportunities. Every conversation, every glance, and every action becomes data that you process silently. People reveal their intentions, fears, and weaknesses without realizing it, and you use that knowledge not to harm, but to protect yourself, influence outcomes, and remain steps ahead. Your power doesn't announce itself. It operates quietly in the spaces between words, in the tension behind smiles, and in the rhythm of movement that most ignore. The reason this makes you exceptional is that most people never learn to see beyond surface appearances. They react to what they hear and believe what they're told, walking blind into traps they don't even sense. You, however, navigate life like someone who understands the battlefield, exists in the invisible currents around them. Your ability to read energy first gives you clarity, control, and dominance in ways others can't even comprehend. It's why your presence feels powerful even when you say nothing, and why your insight always lands exactly where it needs to. Number 11. You mastered the skill of making people feel comfortable enough to expose their motives. Most people reveal only what they intend to, carefully curating their words and actions to hide their true intentions. You, however, learned how to create an environment where people dropped their guard without realizing it. You never forced them to speak or tricked them with flashy tactics. Instead, your calm presence, genuine demeanor, and absence of threat naturally coaxed people to show their true colors. They felt at ease around you, believing you were harmless, approachable, or uninterested, and that very assumption became your advantage. This skill is far more powerful than it seems. When someone exposes their motives, weaknesses, or insecurities without pressure, they hand you the keys to understanding them completely. You aren't reading a facade, you're seeing the architecture behind their behavior. Every slip, every overstatement, and every hidden agenda becomes insight into how they think, what drives them, and where they are vulnerable. While they are busy projecting their image, you are quietly collecting the intelligence that shapes your next move. Mastering this skill takes patience, observation, and subtle control. You don't manipulate with obvious effort. You guide interactions in a way that lets people reveal themselves voluntarily. It's a combination of empathy and strategy. Empathy to make them feel safe, and strategy to interpret the truth behind their words. They don't realize they're giving you the advantage because it feels natural to them. That's the brilliance. You never force the truth out, you simply allow it to emerge. By the time they realize what they've done, it's too late. You have already processed, understood, and positioned yourself based on the information they revealed. People underestimate this skill because it's invisible. They see only friendliness or composure, never realizing it's a calculated tool of awareness. That is why someone who can make others expose themselves without confrontation is quietly unstoppable. Your mastery lies not in confrontation, noise, or aggression, but in the subtle ability to draw truth out of others while remaining untouchable, fully aware, and always in control. Number 12. Your biggest trick was letting them think they were above you. People are easily blinded by ego. They assume superiority, they flaunt confidence, and they carry themselves as if no one can challenge their position. You turned that natural arrogance into your greatest advantage. By letting them believe they were above you, you created a space where they revealed their true selves, their overconfidence, their mistakes, and their blind spots. They underestimated you because they believed their perception of you was complete, not realizing that what they saw was only the surface, carefully curated to hide the depths they could never guess. This approach is deceptively powerful. When someone thinks they are superior, they let down their defenses. They speak freely, act carelessly, and assume their dominance is unquestioned. While they are busy proving themselves, you are quietly observing, learning, and positioning yourself to move when the timing is perfect. They hand you insight without realizing it, all while feeling in control. You didn't need to confront their ego or compete for recognition. You let it operate like a tool that revealed exactly how they function and what drives them. By allowing them to overestimate themselves, you created blind spots that you could exploit without force or aggression. The quiet confidence to stay beneath their radar is a strategy in itself. It requires patience and restraint to resist showing your full potential too soon. Most people rush to prove themselves and end up exposed, but you moved with deliberate timing, letting their assumptions do the work for you. The brilliance of this strategy lies in its subtlety. When the moment comes to act, you're not reacting impulsively. You're executing with clarity, precision, and advantage. They are still trapped in their illusion of superiority, while you operate from a position of real understanding and control. Letting them think they were above you wasn't weakness, it was mastery. It allowed you to move undetected, gather intelligence, and strike with the power of someone who has studied the battlefield while everyone else believed they were already winning. That is how underestimated patience becomes unstoppable dominance. Number 13. They feared what you'd become, but only after you stopped needing them. People are rarely afraid of someone who clings or seeks approval. They fear what emerges when someone becomes self-sufficient, confident, and untethered to their opinions or validation. You reached a point where you stopped needing their recognition, their acceptance, or even their involvement in your life. That's when the fear set in. Not because you changed suddenly, but because your independence highlighted everything they relied on to feel in control. You didn't give them the satisfaction of dependence, and that refusal to be owned or defined became a force they couldn't anticipate. This fear isn't born of loud displays or dramatic gestures. It's quiet, subtle, and profound. When you operate from a place where your actions, choices, and growth are entirely self-directed, people around you are forced to confront their own limitations and projections. They see that their influence no longer holds weight, that their judgments can't touch you, and that the person they assumed they understood is operating on a level they can't access. That realization terrifies them, because they built their narratives around your perceived dependency, and now the foundation of their assumptions is gone. What makes this so extraordinary is the timing. You didn't withdraw to punish, impress, or prove anything. You withdrew, focused, and evolved because that was necessary for your own journey. The fear others felt was a byproduct, a reflection of their own insecurity meeting your independence. You became a mirror of what they feared most, a person who thrives without needing anyone's validation. By stopping the need for approval, you transformed power into freedom. The people who once influenced, judged, or underestimated you could no longer predict your moves or manipulate your path. That freedom is frightening to those still trapped in dependence, but for you, it became your ultimate strength. You didn't set out to scare them, yet your independence made you untouchable, undeniable, and unavoidable. That is the point where underestimated growth transforms into undeniable presence, and the world finally recognizes a force it never expected. Number 14. Your spiritual evolution was never about peace. It was about precision. Most people think spiritual growth is about calm, forgiveness, or inner peace. You understood something far deeper. Evolution isn't about avoiding conflict or sugarcoating reality. It's about developing the clarity and precision to move through life with awareness and purpose. Every lesson, every challenge, every moment of discomfort wasn't just a test of patience or morality. It was a way to sharpen your perception, refine your instincts, and strengthen your ability to act decisively when the time demanded it. You weren't seeking comfort. You were seeking mastery. Precision means knowing exactly when to act, when to remain silent, and when to step back. It's understanding people, energy, and situations so thoroughly that your moves are calculated, deliberate, and impossible to misread. This isn't the kind of spiritual growth that makes you passive or naive. It's active, intelligent, and strategic. You became the person who could navigate chaos, see through deception, and respond in ways that changed outcomes without relying on force or spectacle. Your evolution was a tool, not a trophy. What makes this unique is how subtle and invisible it is. People around you might have assumed your journey was quiet, reflective, or harmless, but that misjudgment became your greatest advantage. They didn't realize that your growth equipped you with insight, discernment, and influence far beyond what they could imagine. Every experience you endured, every moment of observation, and every internal battle contributed to a version of yourself that operates with surgical precision. By the time others perceive your evolution, it's already complete. You don't need to prove your transformation. The results speak for themselves. Your spiritual journey wasn't about peace for its own sake. It was about becoming exact, deliberate, and untouchable in thought, action, and energy. While they were distracted by superficial appearances, you became someone who moves with accuracy, reads people like open books, and executes decisions with a level of clarity that leaves others stunned. This is evolution as power, refinement as strategy, and growth as a force that can't be ignored. The journey of the chosen one is not written in loud gestures or fleeting attention. It's carved in silence, patience, and relentless self-mastery. Every moment of being underestimated, every pause in the chaos, and every scar endured became part of a strategy that few could see coming. What others mistook for weakness was actually preparation. What they assumed was harmlessness was calculated observation, and what they laughed at as softness was the quiet mastery of human behavior. You moved unseen, evolved unseen, and grew unseen, and that invisibility became your ultimate strength. By the time the world caught up, it was already too late. You had become precise, unstoppable, and untouchable. You didn't just navigate life. You transformed it into a space where clarity, strategy, and intuition ruled. The people who tried to define you, control you, or underestimate you were left scrambling, confronting a reality they never anticipated. Your evolution wasn't about proving anything to them. It was about refining yourself into someone who operates beyond assumptions, beyond expectations, and beyond limitations. This is the essence of the chosen one, a force that fools the eye, challenges the mind, and transforms reality through quiet, deliberate mastery. Your power lies not in the noise, but in the subtle, invisible threads you pull that others don't even realize exist. Every move, every choice, every moment of restraint builds a version of you that commands respect without demanding it. If you've been captivated by this journey, make sure to stay connected. Subscribe to the channel for more insights that dig beneath the surface. Like this video to show your support, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and drop a comment to let us know what part resonated with you the most. Stay tuned, stay sharp, and keep evolving. Stay awakened, chosen ones.